a millionaire CEO, Kwame Adebayo, orchestrated a blind date where he brought his twin daughters and presented himself as a man of simple means. The whole dynamic shifted the moment she offered to cover the check. "You brought children on a date," the hostess murmured, her eyebrow arching as Kwame shifted the squirming twins in his arms. "Indeed," he answered with a calm he didn't feel, a diaper bag slung precariously over his shoulder. "It's not exactly a date." The woman's expression was doubtful, but she led them toward a table near the window. "You're fortunate. We only have one other reservation with children tonight." Table 5-inch. Kwame gave a slight nod, his heart racing more than it ever had during a tense boardroom negotiation. Dressed in worn jeans and a plain t-shirt, he was unrecognizable as the mogul featured on magazine covers. His bespoke suits and chauffeured car were replaced for the evening with a borrowed sedan and two mismatched beaded hair ties holding back Zola and Tandy's braids. He settled the girls into their booster seats. Tandy immediately reached for the shakers, while Zola hugged her stuffed springbok, her eyes wide with curiosity. Kwame drew a deep breath and watched the entrance. He was certain the woman from the dating app had stood him up. Her final text was brief and cutting, "Sorry, I can't date a broke father of two. Good luck." He was just about to round up his daughters and depart when the door swung open. A woman entered, a cloth tote bag over her shoulder and a book in her hand. She scanned the eatery, glanced at her phone, and then her eyes found his table. She walked toward him with a nervous but warm smile. "Hi, I'm Amora," she said, tucking a stray LOC behind her ear. "My apologies for being late, the taxi was crawling." Kwame blinked, taken aback. "Ah, I understand," she continued, sitting down without checking her phone again. "Not the most glamorous arrival, I know. But you mentioned a window table with kids, so I assumed this was the spot." He started to speak, to explain the mix-up, but then he truly looked at her. There was a quiet sincerity in her gaze, an endearing awkwardness to her smile, and beneath it all, a familiar tiredness. "No worries," he said softly. "We only just arrived." Amora's attention turned to the girls, who were staring back at her. "I wasn't aware I'd be dining with such esteemed guests," she said, her smile widening. Tandy squinted. "Do you like telling stories?" Amora's laugh was genuine. "More than I like most adults." Zola pushed a crayon across the table toward her. "Draw a jackal," and just like that, Amora grabbed a napkin and started to sketch. In minutes, the girls were giggling at her charmingly lopsided drawing, completely captivated. Kwame leaned back, amazed. The typical discomfort of introducing his daughters to someone new was entirely absent. This felt effortless, not forced. Dinner arrived in a whirlwind of joyful chaos. Pap and stew met the tablecloth, juice was spilled, and a mountain of napkins was used. Amora didn't bat an eye. She helped Tandy wipe her chin and recounted a hilarious tale of her slipping and falling into a display of mangoes at a bustling market. The girls roared with laughter. Kwame felt a warmth spread through his chest, an unfamiliar sensation. Years had passed since anything had felt so natural. Amora never inquired about his profession. She didn't bring up money, success, or anything related to his public identity. She asked Zola what her favorite folk tale was. She listened intently to Tandy's long story about a special stone she had found. When she caught Kwame watching her, her smile was simple and genuine, not coy or flirtatious. A server placed the bill on the table between courses. "Take your time," he offered politely. "Dessert is next." Kwame stared at the folder. He reached for his back pocket, then froze. These were not his pants, and his wallet was in the jacket of his suit. A wave of panic washed over him. Amora noticed. Without a word, she pulled out her own well-loved wallet, slid out a card, and handed it to the server with a quiet smile. "It's all right," she said, seeing his expression. "I've had far worse dates." Kwame was stunned. "You didn't have to do that, I know," she replied gently. "But I wanted to. You looked like you could use a bit of kindness." He was silent. The restaurant's chatter faded away. It was never about the money, he could purchase the entire city block if he chose. But in that moment, it was about how she perceived him, not as Adebayo, the titan of industry, but as a man struggling with booster seats and juice boxes. A father who was trying. He truly saw her then. The faint lines of fatigue around her eyes likely came from long nights with books, not parties. Her blouse was simple, her nails unadorned. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just present, human, and kind. The restaurant started to empty, but their table remained an island of warmth, filled with laughter and crayons. Amora broke a piece of bread, handing half to Zola as she shared a memory from her childhood. "I grew up in a home where money was always tight," she recounted, her gaze distant. "But we had books in every corner, piled on shelves and even on the floor. My gogo used to read to me by candlelight when the power was out. That's why I volunteer with literacy programs. Books made me feel wealthy when we had nothing else." Kwame listened, captivated. Her voice held no envy, no bitterness for what she lacked, only a deep gratitude for what she had been given. It struck him profoundly. Most women he dated were interested in his Hillview estate, his wine collection, or his fleet of cars. Amora never asked about his career. She seemed to care only about who he was, not what he did. For the first time in a very long time, Kwame felt truly seen. "You must love your work," he ventured. Amora nodded. "I do. The children who come to the center after school, their faces light up when I remember their names or save a book just for them. It's a small thing, but I believe it matters." Zola rested her head on Amora's arm, and Amora gently brushed a crumb from the child's cheek. "These two," she whispered, "are something special." Kwame swallowed past a lump in his throat. "They are my entire world." When the meal concluded, Kwame offered to walk Amora to the taxi rank or give her a lift. "It's not a fancy car," he said with a wry smile. "But it runs." Amora hesitated, glancing outside. "That's kind, but I enjoy the walk. It helps me clear my head." He tried to hide his disappointment. Of course, she gave a little wave to the girls and bent to kiss Zola's forehead. "Thank you for the wonderful drawing. Come tell stories again," Tandy called out. Amora's smile lingered. Perhaps then she turned and disappeared into the night. The drive home was silent. The twins were already asleep in their car seats, their hands still smudged with crayon. The napkin art, a drawing of a jackal with too many whiskers and the words *Amora plus Zola* in wobbly letters, was tucked into the dashboard. After parking in his sprawling garage, he stared at it, his heart tightening. His mind flashed back to a different night, long ago, when his late wife, Caroline, had sat on the kitchen floor with the girls, drawing animals with markers on old newspapers. Her laughter had filled their home. That memory had been a painful ghost, making every new connection feel like a betrayal. But tonight, watching Amora with his daughters, seeing her laugh as juice stained her sleeve, he had felt a sense of peace. Not guilt or fear, just a quiet inkling that maybe, just maybe, healing wasn't a betrayal. Perhaps it was permission to keep living, to start anew. He looked at the drawing one last time, then folded it carefully and placed it in the glove compartment. A fragile hope began to bloom in his chest. He had no idea if he would ever see Amora again, but she had already left something precious behind. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. For days had passed since their dinner. For days since Amora had unknowingly stumbled into the wrong date and completely disarmed him with nothing more than crayons, spilled stew, and sincerity. Kwame couldn't get her face out of his mind. The way she had laughed with his girls, the way she paid the bill without a second thought or a hint of judgment. His only clue was a comment she had made about her volunteer work. "I'm at the Ubuntu library, the one with the bold murals." On Saturday morning, Kwame loaded the twins into the car once more. He told himself it was just a casual visit to the library. No agenda, no expectations. Just curiosity and a flicker of hope. The library, with its vibrant murals depicting scenes from African folklore, was easy to spot. Inside, the scent of old paper and polished wood felt like a warm embrace. In a corner, a group of children sat mesmerized, gathered around a woman in a soft cardigan who held a worn picture book. And then the hyena said, "Who has eaten my porridge?" Amora's voice was animated, making the children giggle. Zola gasped. Baba, that's her. Tandy clapped her hands. She's here. Before he could react, the twins dashed forward, squeezing between the other children to get closer to Amora. She paused her story, startled, then her eyes lifted and met his. They widened in recognition as she saw him standing by the entrance, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. Hello, he said quietly. She gently closed the book. Everyone, let's take a short break. 5 minutes, okay? The children groaned but scattered toward beanbags and shelves. Amora stood up. You found me, Kwame nodded. I remembered what you said about the murals. The silence that hung between them was thick with uncertainty, but not hostility. Zola held up a folded piece of paper. We made you another drawing. Amora accepted it with a soft smile. Thank you, sweetheart. Her gaze then returned to Kwame. You weren't the man I was supposed to meet that night, no, he admitted. You were meeting someone else. Amora crossed her arms. Then why did you let me stay? Kwame took a slow breath. Because I couldn't leave. Not when someone finally saw me star. Not Adebayo the CEO, or the man with an absurd net worth. Just me. The father trying to hold everything together. The man who misses his wife. The man who just needed one evening that didn't feel like a transaction. Amora's expression was unreadable. I didn't lie, he added quickly. I didn't pretend to be someone I'm not. I didn't correct you. For once, someone wasn't looking at me through a filter of money and power. You sat down and you listened to my daughters. You paid for our meal. You laughed when things got messy. Her eyes softened. He took a small step closer. My name is Kwame Adebayo. I run a company that has probably funded half the projects in this community center. I own too many suits and live in a house in Hillview that is far too large for 3 people, and most days I despise it. But the other night, none of that seemed to matter, because of you. Amora swallowed, glancing at the twins who were now absorbed in a picture book nearby. So, she said quietly, what happens now? I don't know, he answered honestly. I just knew I couldn't let you vanish without telling you the truth. Not because I expect it to change anything, but because you deserve to know. She looked down at the new drawing in her hand. It showed a jackal with a heart over its head and the words asterisk for Amora asterisk scribbled beneath it. What I saw that night, she murmured, was real. The way you looked at them, the way they looked at you. The way you watched me, as if you were seeing something that frightened you. That wasn't fake, it wasn't, he confirmed. She met his gaze again. But I need time to understand what's real when everything else surrounding you feels so complicated. He nodded. Take all the time you need. A long pause stretched between them. It wasn't goodbye, not yet. And for the first time, that felt like enough. In the days that followed, their meetings were small and quiet. Kwame began bringing the twins to the library more frequently, always on purpose, though Amora would smile and pretend to be surprised each time they arrived. They met at a park once, too. The girls ran barefoot through the grass while Amora read aloud from a book of fables. Kwame sat on a bench, watching her, realizing that her presence made even an ordinary afternoon feel profound. Not flashy or dramatic, just steady. Then one Friday evening, a folded note appeared in Amora's mailbox at her small apartment above a craft shop in Soweto. Childlike handwriting scrolled across it, Dear Mama Amora, come eat with us. We made drawings and treats. Love, Zola, and Tandy and Baba, too. Amora pressed a hand to her heart and smiled, knowing she couldn't refuse. That Sunday, Kwame drove them to his family's traditional homestead in the Eastern Cape. This was my mother's home, he explained as they turned onto the gravel path. I've kept it just as she left it. It's where I come when I need to stop being Mr. Adebayo. The house was modest and welcoming, with clay pots of flowers on the porch and the gentle sound of beaded curtains clinking in the breeze. Inside, Zola and Tandy had turned the living room into an art gallery, taping their crayon masterpieces to every wall. Amora laughed as she entered. You weren't exaggerating about the drawings. Zola grabbed her hand. Come, Sit by me. It was a simple meal of pap and stew, by popular demand. Kwame wore an apron that read *kiss the cook* and feigned embarrassment when sauce splattered on his shirt. The girls chatted endlessly about library books and drum circles. Amara listened, asked questions, passed the bread, and never once glanced at her phone. After dinner, while Kwame brought out a Morabaraba board, Amara helped clear the dishes. As she knelt to tie Zola's shoe, the little girl tilted her head back, braids bouncing. "You have a loc in your eyes," Amara said gently, reaching out. She brushed it aside and carefully clipped a tiny beaded pin in place. Zola beamed. Kwame stood in the doorway, drying a plate, his heart still. In that single moment, something shifted. The way Zola looked at Amara, with pure trust and the kind of unrestrained affection only a child can give, stole his breath. It wasn't coached or manipulated. It was real. Amara sat back on her heels and looked up at him. "I've never seen a child trust me so quickly." Kwame's voice was low. "I've never seen anyone make them feel so safe so fast." She looked at him, surprised. "I mean it," he said, putting the dish towel down. "They don't warm up to people easily. After Caroline passed, it's like they could sense everything, the genuine and the fake. You walked into our lives, and it was as if they had been waiting for you." Amara's eyes glistened. She looked away, smoothing her hand over her jeans. "I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. I just care." That's exactly what they need. The girls were now curled up together with a picture book, their heads resting on each other's shoulders. The evening light slanted softly through the curtains. The world outside, with its chaos and headlines, felt a million miles away. Amara turned back to Kwame. "You're different here. I'm myself," he said. "When I'm not being hounded by reporters or asked about stock prices." She stepped closer. "You don't have to prove anything here. Not to them. Not to me." He smiled. "That's what frightens me the most. That it's real." Amara's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then don't run from it." Kwame looked at her, truly looked, with a gaze that went beyond charm and surface appearances. It was a look of gratitude, of awe. Because somehow, without any effort, she had already become a part of their small world. And for the first time in years, that world didn't feel broken anymore. The photograph surfaced online on a quiet Tuesday morning. A grainy image, captured through the leaves of a nearby tree. Amara was holding hands with Zola and Tandy as they skipped along the pavement outside the Ubuntu library. She was smiling, the girls were laughing. The caption beneath it read, "Mystery woman spotted with Adebayo twins. Who is she?" Within hours, her name was trending. By evening, the press had uncovered every detail. Paparazzi swarmed her small apartment building, their camera lenses peering between her blinds. Microphones were thrust in her face as she tried to leave for her volunteer shift. Headlines speculated wildly about marriage, scandal, and secret affairs. They tore through her life with no regard for the truth. Kwame watched the storm break in real time. His name was everywhere, but this time it was tied to someone he cared for, someone who had never asked for any of this. He tried calling her, but his calls went unanswered. At the community center the next morning, the director called her into his small office. His expression was heavy with regret. "There's been pressure," he said, avoiding her gaze. "One of our main donors threatened to pull his funding. He's concerned about the media frenzy. He says it's a distraction." Amara's heart sank. "I haven't done anything wrong, I know," the director said quietly. "But they don't care about right and wrong, only about appearances." She walked out of the center carrying a small box of her belongings, the whispers of her colleagues trailing her like shadows. It had taken her years to build her small, quiet life. One photograph had destroyed it. That night, she sat on her sofa in the dark. Her phone buzzed incessantly with texts from unknown numbers, reporters, gawkers, strangers with cruel opinions. Only one message held her attention. "Amara, please talk to me. I had no idea this would happen." Kwame *, but she couldn't bring herself to reply. The next morning, the chaos arrived at her doorstep. Dozens of reporters lined the street outside her building. Neighbors peered from their windows. One woman from down the hall yelled, "Is it true? Are you marrying him?" Then a new sound cut through the noise. A car door slamming. Purposeful footsteps. The unmistakable hush that descends on a crowd when someone unexpected appears. Kwame Adebayo stood at the bottom of her steps, his tailored coat unbuttoned, his hair slightly disheveled by the wind. The cameras flashed furiously. He ignored them all, his gaze fixed on Amora's door. From her window above, she watched him, her hands trembling on the curtain. He took a step forward, raising his voice just enough to be heard over the clamor. "I can't change the world, Amora," he called out. "But I can stand between you and it. I can take the cameras, the questions, the noise. Just say the word." His voice cracked slightly. "Let me stand with you." She stood frozen behind her door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Tears welled in her eyes. Her fingers hovered over the lock, but she didn't turn it. Instead, her voice emerged, small but clear through the wood. "You have to protect your daughters. Don't let them get caught in this, they're already in it," he replied, his voice strained. "Because they've asked about you every single night this week. Because they miss you. And so do I." She swallowed a sob. "I didn't ask for this, I know," he said. "But neither did we. And yet somehow, this became the most real thing in my life in years." A long silence stretched out. The cameras clicked. The wind blew. "I'm sorry," she whispered through the door. "But I need you to go." He stood there a moment longer, then nodded slowly. He turned and walked back through the crowd, each step heavy and deliberate. Amora slid to the floor, her back against the door, the box from the community center beside her. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she wished the world would just stop turning. Amora hadn't taken down the drawing. It was still taped to her front door, its wobbly lines and uneven hearts a constant reminder. "We miss you, Mama." Amora was written in crayon. Zola had drawn it in purple, Tandy's handprint was stamped in orange in the corner. For 3 days, Amora paused every time she left her apartment, her fingers brushing against the paper. And each time, she walked away with an aching heart. The media frenzy had quieted, moving on to the next scandal, but the damage was done. Her volunteer position was still on hold. Her name remained fodder for online gossip. She told herself it was for the best: distance, silence, no attachments. But every night she dreamed of small hands in hers and giggles over picture books. She missed the messy dinners, the chaotic drawings, and the warmth that had filled the small homestead in the Eastern Cape. She missed them. At Kwame's estate, a heavy, hollow silence had descended. The girls felt it more than he'd anticipated. They didn't understand public scrutiny or donor pressure. They only knew that Amora had disappeared. On the third night, Tandy climbed into his lap before bed, her eyes shining with confusion. "Is Mama Amora gone forever?" she asked. Kwame gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "No, sweetheart. She just needs a little time." Tandy clutched his shirt. "Did we do something wrong?" Kwame's chest tightened. "Not at all. She loves you so much." Tandy's voice trembled. "Then why won't she come back?" He had no answer for her. The next morning, he found both girls at the kitchen table, surrounded by crayons. They were quiet and unusually focused. When they finished, Zola held up their new creation, a drawing of 3 stick figures labeled "Us," with hearts floating around them. Above it were the words, "We bring our hearts." Kwame looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he stood up. "We're going to see her," he said. Zola's eyes lit up. Tandy clapped her hands. They dressed quickly. No cameras followed them this time. He took the back streets, parked 2 blocks away, and carried the girls in his arms to avoid any lingering press. When they reached her door, the old drawing was still there, fluttering in the breeze. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, more softly. Still nothing. He looked down at his daughters. "Are you ready?" Zola nodded and reached up, taping their new drawing directly below the old one. Then the girls stood side by side before the door, their arms stretched out, ready for a hug they weren't sure they would receive. Inside, Amora had been sitting on the floor, trying to organize her books to keep her mind occupied. When she heard the knock, she froze. Then she heard it, small voices giggling, the rustle of paper, and the unmistakable sound of love waiting on her doorstep. She opened the door slowly, and there they were. Zola and Tandy stood with their arms wide open, their eyes bright. No fanfare, no press, just hope. "With," Zola whispered. Amora fell to her knees, her arms flinging open as tears streamed down her face. The girls ran into her embrace without hesitation, burying their faces in her neck. "I missed you," Amora choked out, so much." Kwame stood quietly behind them, his hands in his coat pockets. He waited until Amora looked up, her eyes filled with emotion. "I didn't come with headlines," he said. "I didn't come with promises. I just came with my heart." And there she rose slowly, still holding the girls. "Why did you really come?" he exhaled. "Because I can live without the fame, without the money, without the noise. But I can't live without this." "Not without you," the girls squeezed Amora tighter. She closed her eyes. "I thought I had to protect you from all of it. You were trying to protect us by leaving," he said gently. "But that's not protection. That's pain." She opened the door wider. "Then come in." He stepped forward, the girl still wrapped around her legs. The moment was quiet. No reporters, no flashing lights. Just for hearts in a doorway. "I don't need anything else," he whispered. She nodded, her voice breaking. "Me neither." And this time, no one let go. Life after that day never returned to how it was before. Instead, it blossomed into something better, quieter, and more honest. Kwame and Amora began again, not in secret or with fanfare, but with a gentle determination to build their life correctly. There were no staged photo opportunities or grand announcements, only walks in the park, story time in the living room, and grocery trips where Zola insisted on pushing the trolley while Tandy rode inside. Amora moved forward cautiously, but she stayed. And Kwame respected her pace, never rushing her, never pushing. The world had already tried to tear her from her comfort zone. He refused to be another force doing the same. Instead, he asked her softly, "If you could do anything in the world, what would it be?" Amora smiled. "Start a reading program for children who don't have books. For the ones who linger at the back of the community center until closing time because they don't want to go home." Kwame nodded. "Then let's build it." They named it Ithemba Lalacha, Hope of the Youth, a free, mobile reading program that traveled to shelters, community centers, and underserved schools. Amora organized volunteers, selected books, and read to children with the same warmth she had shown Zola and Tandy that first night. Kwame funded it quietly, letting her lead every decision. When reporters called, he declined interviews. Instead, his team issued press releases highlighting Ithemba Lalacha and its impact. Slowly, the narrative shifted. Headlines became less about the mystery woman and more about the program itself. At home, their rhythm became beautifully ordinary. Amora began staying for dinner more often, then sleeping over when the girls pleaded with her. She read them bedtime stories, giving each character a different voice as they clung to her, begging for one more page. She taught them how to draw faces that showed feelings and how to create their own tiny picture books. Kwame often watched from the hallway, his heart swelling with something deeper than happiness, something that felt like home. One evening, after a story about a lost meerkat who found a new family, the girls were yawning sleepily under their blankets. Amora tucked them in, brushing their hair back. Tandy reached up, blinking slowly. "Mama Amora." "Yes, sweetheart." "Can I call you Mama Amora?" The room went still. Kwame stood frozen in the doorway, holding his breath. Amora's eyes filled with tears instantly. She dropped to her knees beside the bed, clutching Tandy's small hand. "If that's what you want, then yes. Of course, you can." Tandy nodded, curling closer. Zola reached out for her, too. Amora kissed their foreheads, her tears falling silently onto their blankets. Kwame stepped into the room, sat on the edge of the bed, and took Amora's hand in his. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The girls fell asleep holding onto her fingers. Later that night, after the dishes were done and the house was quiet, Kwame and Amora sat on the porch swing at the homestead, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the beaded curtains his mother had hung decades ago. "I never wanted to replace anyone," Amora whispered. "You didn't," he said. "You became something entirely your own." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I didn't think I had enough to give." Kwame looked at her, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave them a safe place to land. You gave me a reason to believe again." Amora smiled through fresh tears. "I guess this us just happened." "No," Kwame said softly. "It didn't just happen. We chose this. Every small moment, every quiet choice. We made this." She nodded, her heart full. And in the stillness of that evening, under the ordinary glow of a porch light, a family was no longer forming. It was already whole. 1 year later, so much had changed, yet everything that mattered remained beautifully simple. Amora still lived in her cozy apartment above the craft shop in Soweto. She had returned to the community center, not out of need, but out of love. Children still ran into her arms, and her name appeared in quiet articles about Ithemba Lalacha, but no one called her the CEO's fiancée anymore. She was just Amora, and that was more than enough. Kwame never asked her to move into his sterile Hillview estate. He understood she needed her own roots, not marble floors. Instead, they spent most of their time at the traditional homestead, a place of crayons, warmth, and beaded curtains. On a soft spring afternoon, they had a small family picnic in the backyard. Kwame had restored the worn wooden table from the night they first met, complete with its mismatched chairs. Amora smiled when she saw it. "You brought back the wrong table. Some mistakes," Kwame said, grinning, "are worth keeping." The girls ran barefoot, weaving daisy chains into their hair, their laughter echoing through the air. After they finished dessert, they disappeared inside, returning with a tiny box wrapped in napkins. "For you," Tandy announced, dropping it into Amora's lap. Inside was a ring woven from soft twine and colorful beads, uneven and precious. "We made it," Zola said proudly. "It's your special ring." Kwame knelt beside her, his voice trembling slightly. "I used to believe I would only be loved for what I had. My name, the money. But then came a wrong table, 2 little girls, and a woman who looked past all of it and saw me." He took her hand. "I'm not asking for a headline or a grand ceremony. Just this. Be you, with us. With them. Be the heart of this home." He paused. "Amora Ndlovu, will you marry me?" Amora laughed through her tears. She looked at the homemade ring and slipped it onto her finger. "We've been a family for a while now," she said. "You're just catching up," the girls shrieked with joy, circling them in a flurry of hugs and giggles. There were no cameras, no breaking news. Only sunlight, a gentle breeze, and 2 children who had unknowingly woven the most unexpected love story. That evening, as the sky turned to gold, Kwame and Amora sat on the porch swing, arms wrapped around each other. "You weren't the wrong woman," he whispered. "You were just the right one, at a table no one expected." Amora smiled. "And you were never the billionaire. You were the barber with kind eyes and stew on his shirt." In the quiet of that ordinary day, they began the rest of their lives. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive with perfect timing. It appears softly, sits at the wrong table, and turns your entire world right side up. Kwame had tried to shield his heart with wealth, and Amora feared her small world couldn't hold a love so big. But in the end, it wasn't the estate or the fortune that mattered. It was bedtime stories, crayon hearts, and a woman who chose to see the man, not the name.